I'm Rabbi Susan Nannis, Director of Adult Programs at Wilshire Boulevard Temple, and on behalf of myself and my producing partner, Linda Kent, we are so thrilled to have you here this afternoon for a very special event, Bernard-Henri Lévy, in conversation with Tom Teicholz. But before we do that, we have another special treat, a special introduction, and our special guest. Please welcome Judea Pearl.
Hello. I'm so honored and delighted to introduce my friend, my mentor, and my hero, Bernard-Henri Lévy, who is a true champion of humanity and whose life and writings and journeys make him personify the true meaning of the words, the will to see. I first met Bernard in our home in Encino, where he came to interview my late wife and I in our house. It was about a year after the tragedy, in preparation for his book, Who Killed Daniel Pearl? And we were at that time overwhelmed by trying to understand why so many people are trying to turn Danny into an icon or a hero when he was the epitome of the anti-hero. He was a soft-spoken, unassuming, laid-back California beach boy, who would rather strike a conversation with a subway musician than the king of Saudi Arabia or a Washington politician. But Bernard explained to us why. There is heroism, he said, in the ordinary, in decency, in truth and silent integrity, but it takes a tragedy to unveil. Bernard was not finished with the interview. He insisted on seeing Danny's room, seeing his pictures, opening the book on his shelf, even touching his violin, to make sure he understood who Danny was before writing that book. And here is what Bernard said in the second chapter of his book. And I'm going to read it, I'm going to verbatim, because every word of it is a tower of thought. And every thought sings another hymn to the author of The Will to See, dispatches from a world of misery and hope. There's the Danny, Bernard writes. I've read his articles, who, even if he is proud of America, thinks that America, and in general the West, has an obligation to the world, owes the world something. There is a diehard humanist who, in spite of everything that he sees and has seen in his life, continues to want to believe that man is not a predator to other men, but a brother, a kindred spirit. There is the journalist, Bernard continues, who through his reporting goes unflaggingly towards the forgotten of the world, paid his debt, our debt, the debt of the hordes of smug and well-fed Westerners who couldn't care less about world poverty and don't consider themselves their brother's keepers. There's that face, there aren't that many, in which our era can see itself without shame. Thank you, Bernard, for giving us books like The Will to See. There aren't that many, in which our era can see itself without shame. Thank you.
Have a seat right here in the front. So before I welcome our guests, I just want to welcome those who are watching online. We know there are quite a number of you who are watching this being streamed, and we welcome you as well. So please welcome now, first our moderator, our questioner, Tom Teicholz, who is a journalist, author, commentator on culture, my partner on a number of programs, a very accomplished man in his own right. Please welcome Tom Teicholz. And now, of course, our honored guest, journalist, philosopher, filmmaker, teacher, visionary, Bernard-Henri Lévy.
Welcome, all of you, today. I'm so happy that you're here and so happy to be here with Bernard. And thank you, Judea, for that wonderful, moving introduction. We're going to talk for about 35, 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to your questions. So I will try to keep to that. I want to just begin by saying that Bernard-Henri Lévy is a philosopher, a filmmaker, reporter, journalist, and let's be honest, only in France can you be a philosopher filmmaker. We don't get that in Hollywood so much. What I find so admirable about Bernard is that he could have lived or could live the life of a bourgeois French intellectual, public intellectual, and yet throughout his life he has been impelled to go to what the French would call les lieux maudits, the cursed places in the world. And he has gone there in books like War, Evil, and the End of History, where he went to Angola, Burundi, Colombia, Sri Lanka, and Sudan, and now in The Will to See, which we will be discussing. Judea, you know, I've said this to you personally, but I was deeply affected by something that Bernard said to me when we first met in 2002. And we're talking about his book, Who Killed Daniel Pearl. And Bernard said, the murder of Daniel Pearl was a hinge event, one that would be looked upon for the 21st century, much as we look upon Alfred Dreyfus for the 20th. The sign that anti-Semitism is acceptable again, and that the murder of Jews can be done publicly. And regrettably, that has proved true, not only in Pakistan, but certainly in France and in the United States. And I think about your having said that all the time. And Judea's personal tragedy has regrettably become a global tragedy of anti-Semitism and of Jews being murdered. Now, your latest book, The Will to See, Dispatches from a World of Misery and Hope, is a no less urgent chronicle that's divided into two parts. In the first part, he sort of discusses his impulse to travel to these places. And in the second, he tells about the places he visited. In 2020, while all of us were in lockdown. And with a nod to Rimbaud, you call it the history of my follies. Now, this second part, which I want to open with, has you going to Nigeria and visiting with the Kurds in their territories. And you also visit some places that you'd been to many years before, like Bangladesh and Afghanistan. But you open with the massacre of Christians in Nigeria as what you call a slow-motion war that the world ignores. And the Fulani, who, if you've heard of them at all, are thought of as nomads, traditional nomads, but who in fact you discover are Islamic extremists who are allied with Boko Haram. And then you go to with the Kurds, which is a completely different setting, and for them, you call them the forgotten of the forgotten, and you write, "Give the Kurds justice, it is time." So I want you to tell us about what you saw in Nigeria first.
First, I want to say how happy I am to be back at the Wilshire Boulevard Synagogue after a few years. The COVID has come here, and we are less numerous than last time, I know, but I know also that we are very numerous offline, on streaming, and I want to say hello to all those who are with us without being completely in the room with us. So I'm happy that life starts again, that we are starting to dialogue really and to come back to other topics than health and so on. First, also, I want to say how moved I was by the words of Judea Pearl. Really moved. The fact that he accepted to introduce our little conversation means the world for me. Judea and Ruth have been very important in my life. About Danny, it is true that I had the immediate feeling when the tragedy happened in February 2002 that this individual tragedy had world dimensions. And I had the immediate feeling that the more we will advance in the century, the more the evidence would be clear. And I remember, I never said it to Judea, I think. I remember very, very well, so vividly. I heard the news, I learned the news of the passing of his son, of Danny, in Kabul. I was in Kabul. I was the special envoy at this time of my president, Jacques Chirac. It was just after the death of Commander Massoud, September 11, the war against Taliban, the victory against Taliban, and my president sent me as his personal envoy to Afghanistan. And I was in the office of President Hamid Karzai when he received a note informing him about the event. And I remember so vividly today, I don't know if I told it to you already, how at the minute I learned it, Hamid Karzai told me, "I'm sorry, we have to interrupt the conversation, something happened." He told me what happened. And he went to confer with one of his associates or minister or whatsoever. And he told me that the Taliban had invaded Afghanistan. And I remember very vividly how at the minute I learned it, Hamid Karzai told me, "I'm sorry, we have to interrupt the conversation, something happened." He told me what. What happened? And he went to confer with one of his associates or minister or whatsoever. And I immediately asked a place where my Touraya telephone could work. It was before the mobiles. I had a big Touraya. I was driven by American security special forces on the roof of the presidency of Karzai, on the roof, surrounded by a group of American special forces. And with my phone, I called my French publisher, Olivier Nora, the CEO of Grasset. And this day, 5 minutes after learning the news, I told him, my dear Olivier, I have to tell you that my next book will be about the death of Daniel Pearl. He told me, the news was just fresh, few hours, but he told me, what do you mean? I said, yes. So who killed Daniel Pearl? What do you mean? I said, okay, you will understand one day, but know that it is my next book, that you have to schedule it for 1 year from now, and you have to know that it is, with September 11, one of the founding events of the century in which we are entering. This was the story. So, alas, I was right, and I can just repeat it here. About this new book, The Will to See, Tom Teicholz told you more or less what it is. It is true that it starts with a completely unknown story. And an unknown story, an underrated, underestimated story of this importance, when it is about life and death, makes me really crazy and mad. One day, I was in New York, and I received one of the numerous emissaries, desperate people who ask me very often rendezvous. He was a Nigerian guy, a man from Nigeria. And he tells me something is happening in my country which is terrible, which is genocide. If it is not yet genocide, it can become a genocide very soon. It is a massacre on a large scale of Christians of Nigeria by radical Islamists. I told him, but I never heard. Are you speaking about Boko Haram? He said, yes, but not only Boko Haram. Boko Haram is just a limited thing on the north of Nigeria. I'm telling you about something much more important and on a much bigger scale. And you are right, Mr. Lévy, nobody told, no articles in the press because nobody went there. So please, I know my NGO, Christian NGO, knows that you are not afraid sometimes to do things which others don't do. So please try to find a newspaper. So I called my friend Tunku Varadarajan at this time, or James Taranto at the Wall Street Journal. I called the chief editor of Paris Match. I called chief editor of Stern in Germany. I called 4 or 5 or 6 newspapers, and I told them I'm going to go to Nigeria, which I did. And I found a completely unknown story, which is more or less what the anonymous emissary of these martyrized Christians told me, which is massacre on large scale of people being guilty not of having done this or that, but guilty of being what they were, which is Christians. And I discovered that this place, Nigeria, was one of the ignored front line of the world war declared to civilization, to democracy, to decency by radical Islamism. And as a human being, as a militant of human rights, but also as a Jew, this idea of women and men tortured, pursued, killed, martyrized just because of what they are, for me was unsufferable, was unbearable. And the most absolute scandal, so I went, I spent time, I brought back this story. Those among you who will come tomorrow at the Cinematheque of Los Angeles.
The American Cinematheque, Las Vegas, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. They're screening the film of the Will to See, the documentary.
You will see images of that, of Boko Haram, of victims of Boko Haram, of those affiliates of Boko Haram who are called the Fulani militias, and it is unprecedented images. Nobody has filmed that. Nobody has related that. And for me, to relate something which has not been related for the man whom I am and for the Jew whom I am, it is a duty and a must. You will see in the book and in the movie there is, for example, one story of a young lady, a magnificent young lady, charming, clever, mother of 5, beautiful, very young, called Jumai Victor. One day, and you see all that in the film, and I hope you see it through my writing. One day, a group of Fulani extremist Muslims, Islamists, come to her village. They kill everyone in the village. A few dozens, they kill everyone. All the women are eviscerated. They are with a machete, the bellies are open. She was pregnant of her number 6 child. The emir of the Fulani, the chief, the emir, the so-called ideological chief, made a little fatwa, a little reflection, and he said to his comrades, to his affiliates, a pregnant woman cannot be eviscerated, so we'll do something else. We are going to cut her arm piece after piece. The first guy cuts the fingers, half of the fingers, the second one, the rest of the fingers, the third, etc., etc. The last one claims and complains that he did not have his part and cuts the end of the arm. And you see this absolutely sweet and great lady, totally crippled, very beautiful, by the way, very charming, with one arm absolutely cut like at the butcher's. And she dies after that. The film tells the whole story. So that's Nigeria. And when I was very unhappy when I was there, I was very sad. And it took me some time when I came back to France to recover from this story, this encounter, and all the rest. But to do that, to get out of my area of comfort, to get out of my safe space, in order to encounter these sorts of people and to convey their tragedy to the rest of the world, makes me not happy, of course, not proud, it is not the term, but I feel faithful to what I have been taught by those who shaped me when I was a young boy and a young man.
In your dispatches, you at times seem to hold on to a notion of a grand gesture, whether it's the idea of the Kurds being able to return to Mosul, like de Gaulle entering Paris, or you go in Libya to the Roman ruins at Tarhuna and make a declaration there. But no sooner have you made your declaration than it's denounced and you are hounded by social media. They give out your information. And I wonder if you have a feeling whether these sort of grand gestures can even be meaningful anymore in a world in which, in these countries, the media is controlled, they repress information, there's fake news, etc. Because it's one thing to see it and make the statement, but it's very hard for this to be communicated anymore.
More than ever.
Yeah.
The more it is difficult, the less it is heard, the more it is important for me. Yes, of course. I always liked, since I'm a child, I always liked people who do difficult things. I always liked writers who were also men of action. I admired my father, who was a hero of the anti-fascist fight during the Spanish War first. He enlisted himself. He was just a boy. He was 17 in the Republican Army, in the International Brigade, then in the Army of the Free France, who liberated France. So I admired him. I admired writers like the British poet Lord Byron, who is abundantly quoted in this book, who decides that the cause of the Greeks liberating themselves from the Ottomans' new imperialism, that the life of Lord Byron was worth being lived, that it was admirable, that the fact that he left behind all his life, his fortune, his nice way of living in order to die in Missolonghi was a great proof of humanity. So grandeur, yes, means something to me. And not only in special men, any ordinary woman or man, any single woman or man, any of us has in himself the possibility to be a little more grand than himself, a little higher than he is. Every one of us. In every circumstance of life, we have this possibility to be just not just what we are, a little more, by an act of solidarity, by an act of bravery, and sometimes by an act of heroism. And these moments in humanity is really what gives me hope. This book consists in the dispatches of a world from misery and of hope. And what gives me hope is this ability of women and men to à se hisser au-dessus d'eux-mêmes, to rise themselves a little above themselves. And even in politics, of course, each of us is more on the right or more on the left, but this is not the most important. The most important is right or left, Republican or Democrat, whatever. These moments where a stateswoman or a statesman does an act with something is something which consists in what I, for example, when my President François Mitterrand, whom I disagreed with him on nearly everything, one day he was in his plane coming back from one G8 summit in Portugal to Paris, and his plane suddenly made a U-turn and he decided to head toward the city of Sarajevo, besieged, under bombs and heavy shelling, and to land, and by this act to stop for a moment the massacre. An act like this one reconciled me with him for a while. This is what I like in life.
And you say about your father, happy are the sons whose fathers were heroes. You list him as sort of an inspiration in some way. You were born in Algeria. We're now turning to the first part of the book where Bernard sort of excavates his impulse. I call it what makes BHL run. You were born in Algeria, but you as an infant, your family moved to Paris. You attended a prestigious lycée, and then the École Normale Supérieure, which is one of the greatest public universities in France. I attended the lycée in New York, and I can say that the French education left me with a lifelong authority problem. And I've noticed that you also seem not to like to be told what you can and can't do, because not everyone who's told to lock down decides to go to Mogadishu. So talk a little bit about how the pandemic affected you and impelled you to go to these places, and whether it really is these repressive regimes and these repressive authorities that you have to put yourself against.
I would not say repressive, because, of course, the pandemic, I'm like each of us. I was afraid for my family. I was anxious for my grandchildren. I respected the rules and the regulations. I wore a mask when the mask was prescribed, and so on. So I took very seriously the pandemic, the plague, coronavirus plague. But I very soon understood that there was a side effect. There was a collateral effect. And that this order, which was summoned to us to stay at home, on French TV, I think it was the same here, we had a night and day written, stay at home, stay at home, stay at home. This way of staying at home had the collateral effect to disconnect us completely from those who have no home to stay, if I dare say. It was easy to stay at home for me, probably, I suppose, for you. But I knew by experience that there are parts of the world where there is no home. If there is one, and if you stay in it, you starve. And if you don't starve, you are killed in your home by gangsters, radical Islamists, and so on and so on. And I soon understood that these situations were completely forgotten by my fellow citizens in France, but in all Europe, and I think also in America. I looked at CNN at night, and I discovered that it was as if half of the world, if not two-thirds, had been erased from the world and from the news. We were living as if there was no longer the war in Syria, as if there was no longer the war in Ukraine, as if there was no longer any massacre of Christians in Nigeria, and so on, and so on. As if the Muslim Brotherhood was not still proceeding and processing, etc. Then I decided that precisely because of this situation, precisely because of this assignation which was made to us to remain at home, I had, respecting the laws, I had to do all my possible, all that I could, to not to break the rules, but to break this wall of silence and this wall of indifference which we were building around us. And I went. I told you for Nigeria, I called the Wall Street Journal, Paris Match, and so on. But I told them very soon, I see that you are doing no longer reportage, because it's very difficult, because there is no way to travel, because it takes a long time, and so on and so on. I have time. I am patient. I can find some way of transport out of the commercial normal flights. So do you want reportage about places which are slowly disappearing from the screen, the mental screen of your readers? They said yes. And I devoted the whole year to go to these places which you have in the book. And for example, Mogadishu, I think it is sure that I was the only reporter to go during this time, but I think that I was the only one, has to be checked, to have gone seriously to Mogadishu since years, if not decades, if not since the fall of the Black Falcon.
Black Hawk Down.
Black Hawk. So, again, doing that, going to Mogadishu, bringing back these voices from hell, because Mogadishu is hell, bringing back, collecting and bringing back the images which you will see if you come, you are invited at Cinematheque tomorrow. It is the first images of Mogadishu which have been filmed since years and years. For me, it's a mitzvot. It's my way of being a Jew. It's my way of being a man. It's my way of doing my duty of a member of mankind. And I was, again, not happy because, again, you come back from Mogadishu as from a journey to hell, but I thought I did my part. I did my part when I brought back these images of Mogadishu, of villages remote from Mogadishu, where we were stuck in a suicide attack of a car, when we saw we were on the front line dividing the normal people from Al-Qaeda members in Mogadishu who are called Al-Shabaab and so on. Filming all that, bringing back as a treasury of misery those images, for me, was an achievement.
And you say, I mean, you in this book, you basically propose, dare I call it, a philosophy of radical empathy, that we have to be engaged, not disengaged, well, what you say is, what is intolerable is the fierce indifference of my fellow Westerners. And that's what we have to fight against in ourselves. And I would say that there are many well-meaning, engaged people, no doubt, in the audience and watching tonight. But there's also this phenomenon of burnout, where people feel they just can't look anymore. And what do you say to that?
I say that I am like them. Me too.
Not me too.
No, but I understand their reflex. When after a few days in Mogadishu, I had the temptation to say, stop, enough is enough, I have to be back. After spending a few nights in the trenches of Donbass at the border between Ukraine and Russia, with in front of me those crazy pro-Putin separatists shelling us. After having seen failed hospitals with a heavily wounded young guy who could be the age of my grandchildren and crippled forever and for nothing, I feel also enough is enough. Why should I continue to see that? But I know that if there are not some to show, and if we are not a lot to feel compelled to see, it will continue on and on and on and on forever on a larger scale. And believing on a, not in a better humanity, but in a less bad humanity, believing in a repaired humanity, believing in tikkun olam, reparation. I believe that one has to do that. After that, I reassure you, I'm not an angel. I have a good life. When I come in Los Angeles, I go in one of the good hotels of the city. I know how to have fun with my friends and my families. That's not the question. But if I was not and I have the same feeling, but I think it is part of my job to provide philosophy, to write some good literature, and sometimes to bring in the kitchen, in our kitchen, some images which are unbearable. If you come tomorrow to Cinematheque, you will see. It might make you sick, maybe, for a few hours or for the next days. Maybe till the next Shabbat, you will feel a little obsessed by the images of the young girls who are the age of your daughters or who are fighting Erdogan and ISIS. Children, they are 20 years girls having no life, no family, dreaming to have a normal existence with children, with a job and so on, having to take care of their death, to take care of their cities, to protect their families and their people. It's really a very moving image. It might haunt you a few days, but I think it is not totally irrelevant to know that this exists, and that if we are free, if we don't have more terrorist attack in France, another September 11, God does that we have not in New York, it is because of these young ladies who are the front line, who stop the killers and the barbarian. We have to know them.
In your book, you root your impulse to travel to these places, not just as a reporter. Really, you say you're not a journalist, you want to make a difference. And you root this in your Jewish soul, your neshama. You say, the Jew in me cannot help but recognize himself in the inability to report facts without matching them with a good and rightful action, a mitzvah, the ultimate purpose of which will be the repair of the world, tikkun olam. And you write, ironically, it took many years to recognize the desire to report, to spend time in uncomfortable places as Jewish.
Yeah, you said it, and it is wholly said in this part of the book. Yeah, a journalist is inhabited by the ideal of objectivity. Just report the facts, which is a very noble task, by the way. Just report the facts in a time of fake news, of alternative truth, as the crazy people say, in the time of ideology, it's very important to have a group of people devoting themselves just to bring back facts. They do that. They do it well. And we have in America and in France great reporters. Daniel Pearl was one of them, probably one of the best. I'm not a reporter. I can be, but I'm not the best. I'm not the best. And I have another ideal, which is not only to see and not only to report, but also to intervene and to act. The will to see and the will to do in one moment. I have both. I have the will to see, I have the will to do. When I come back from this travel in hell in Nigeria, I do my best to have a Christian Nigerian delegation received in places of high power in America and in France, which happened. When I go to Syrian Kurdistan, when I spend time in Kamishli, the capital of Syrian Kurdistan, when I spend time with the General-in-Chief of the Kurdish forces, General Maslum Kobane, I not only report about his bravery, I put him in contact, and you will see that in the movie. I'm sorry we cannot screen it today, but you will have it tomorrow. I put him in contact live on my cell phone with President Macron. They exchange, the scene is in the movie, they exchange on the phone. General Kobane, who is under heavy attack from the Turks, who is searched by Turkish drones to kill him, makes some precise demands to President Macron through my phone, and Macron makes some precise replies. And achieving that, so reporting for Paris Match and Wall Street Journal, plus machinery, organizing this bridge between the two, made my week and made my reportage. And I felt being what I had to do, what I had to be.
I'm going to open it up to questions in a second, but before we do, I wanted to ask you, when you interpose yourself in these situations, is this vanity? Is this ego? Or is this what you feel your mission is? Or all of the above?
Mission will be ego. No, I don't. Mission is too high word. No. I can do it. I can do it. Having gathered through my life a little credit, number one. Having the chance, number two, to be citizen of a country where the President of the Republic and the institution belong to the citizens. They are not kings. They are my representative. I feel entitled to call my president and to tell him, you have the duty of doing this and that and that. It is not my mission, it is his mission. And I do it because if I did not do that, I would feel guilty of non-assistance to people in danger. When I see General Kobane in this situation, having to change home every night, literally traced by Turkish drones looking for him, when I see that, he's a brave man. He's a great Kurd. He's protecting my children and my grandchildren from having more attacks. I know that there might be a solution for him and for his people, and that my country can contribute. I have the phone number of Élysée Palace, not a private number, of anyone. Just institutional number of Élysée Palace, which any citizen can know. 01429200000. It is in the in the internet. I do it, and I ask to the man at the entrance, please, I'm Bernard-Henri Lévy, can I speak to my president? Who is my president? By the way, I voted for him, so he's double. So neither ego nor mission, just duty.
I think that's a good place to stop right now. Now, I just want to say, before I take questions from the crowd, I would greatly appreciate it if you ask questions. Please refrain from making speeches. If your cousin knows Bernard's cousin, bring it up later. If you want to know where he gets his fabulous shirts, I believe it's Charvet Custom, but you can ask him later. And questions, please. Yes, ma'am. Oh. I can repeat them. She can ask them and I can. Okay. So, ma'am, please.
I'm very curious. You said you could arrange travel during 2020. How did you manage to get to Mogadishu and Syria and Ukraine, both in terms of flights as well as traveling around?
I'll repeat the question. The question is, how could you arrange for travel to such places as Mogadishu and accommodations there during this time?
Come to Cinematheque tomorrow. In the film, there is the film and the making of the film. There is both. There is the making of. I managed. It depends. It depended. Mogadishu, I went in a private plane. Ukraine, the Donbass, it happened that I know a young, nice Jewish boy, a nice, good Jew, a good Jew, by the way, who happens to be president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. I met him before he was president. The image is in the film of our first encounter when he was not yet president. So I got in touch with him between Jewish boys. I told him, you have a huge war at your borders, which is the border of Europe. You are confronting someone who wants the death of Europe, Putin. I have time. I'm ready to come. I'm ready to walk or to drive the 450 kilometers of front line between the drive. I don't drive, but I have a driver. I don't know how to drive, to be honest. But so he told me welcome, and we organized the thing. He told me it's very difficult, very risky, blah blah blah. I know. I told him I know that. I just ask you, do you want me to come? But we never accept journalists. I'm not a journalist. Okay, I'm a writer. Okay. So this is the way. In each time, it needs patience, it needs time, it needs energy. The gift of life does that I am not too much deprived of these virtues. Okay? So I make it.
Yes. Ma'am, right over there. Yes, sure. So the question is, when did you move from being a man of pure thought, as you put it in the book, to a man of action? And among the questions I didn't get to ask tonight, he discusses how he went to Bangladesh in 1970, just after a few years after finishing his graduate school in philosophy.
Exactly. When is your question? The reply is immediately. Honestly, immediately. 1971. I have been shaped, for those who are familiar with continental philosophy, by the philosophy of Edmund Husserl, Husserl. Edmund Husserl is, his thought has two wings, pure thought and phenomenology. Pure thought, abstract, in the sky of ideas, and phenomenology, concrete, at the contact of things, both wings. So I am the inheritor of the two aspects of the Edmund Husserlian philosophy. So as soon as I felt I was more or less done with abstract philosophy, I had my degree, I got the point, to say it good. Okay, I said, let's try to see what happens on the side of the real things. And I tell that in detail in the book, first part of the book, and I show it in detail in the movie. In the movie, I refound the archives of this time. In 71, there was a genocide, probably a genocide, in eastern Pakistan, which was to be called Bangladesh. When I say probably a genocide, I say probably because till now, we don't know if it was 800,000 death, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, some even say 4 million. We don't know. They are countless. Nameless, of course, and faceless, but countless. So there was this probably genocide. Complete indifference of the world. Nothing in the news, and there was not coronavirus at this time, just indifference. And there was in France an old writer whom I admired a lot, who was André Malraux, great novelist of the 30s, who was still alive, who had been in the second part of his life Minister of General de Gaulle, and he launched an appeal for the constitution of an international brigade to Bangladesh. So the film shows all of that. I write him a letter with my boyish writing, my childish writing. I write a letter which has been kept by the archives. He replies to me, he receives me. I go to Bangladesh. I am witness of the last step of the liberation of the country. By the way, by a Jewish general, that's another story. Muslim country, Bangladesh, separating itself from another Muslim country, Pakistan. I stay there for a few months. I become the advisor of the old president of the newly created country. And the philosopher I am understands that the philosophy is worth being studied and practiced even more when it goes in contact with the reality of the things. So I understood that very quickly, I must say, honestly, immediately. But all my generation had this, it is not a peculiarity. I belong to the generation who made Doctors Without Borders. I belong to a generation who made some NGOs. I belong to a generation who had the desire and the illusion to change the world, to make the revolution, which I very quickly stopped believing in revolution, but it was a tendency of this time.
Two more questions. Yes, the gentleman over there. So the question is, you report on Nigeria, you tell us about this tragedy. What can we do, even all of us in the room, what can we do about what's going on there?
what can we do? First of all, be aware. Second, go to you are Americans, I'm not, to your congressman, to your governor, to whatever authority, and alert. Number three, if I were speaking to a Christian audience, which is not the case today, I would tell them they are your brothers in faith and in soul, Christians as you are. Why don't you go and rebuild their churches? But here is something else. But we are Jews. We have the duty. They are our brothers since Vatican II, since Nostra Aetate. They are our brothers, the Christians. They are not our sons, like in the old theology. They are our brothers, so we have a duty toward them. So help by all means. And as for myself, I have the project, but it's very, very ambitious. How can I say that? 20 years ago, at the time of the genocide in Rwanda, 26 years ago, I made an oath to myself, I swore myself, not to be witness in the rest of my life of such a shame. And if such a shame was to threaten, to do all my possible to stop it. Because I remember the Rwanda genocide. I was 40 years old. I was I had already a voice, I already wrote, and people like me could not do anything to stop. So it is coming again. Nigeria can become another Rwanda. And my intention is to be faithful to my oath of 1994. Do all that I can to prevent. Nigeria is at the edge of Rwanda. This edge has not to be crossed. So we'll see. I have a few plans in order to alert those who have the concrete power to stop the genocide. I was in Washington 2 or 3 days ago, and I addressed, you know that I recognize you in spite of the mask. I addressed people in the Congress, people in the administration. I have plans to do more, and dramatically, I hope. Let's see.
Yes, sir.
Last one, I think.
Last one, yeah. Has Jewish philosophy and literature been instrumental in the development of your action plan? And I do recommend Bernard's book, The Genius of Judaism, which not only makes him declare as a proud French Jew, but also makes France very much a country that owes the Jews a great deal. But I'll let you answer.
Yes, people often say that the Jews owe France. I think the reverse. France owes the Jews, probably more. French literature, French language, French institutions, French history owes the Jews a lot. The Jewish thought, my reply is yes, it shapes and patterns my thought, my mental system, my way of behave from top to toes. I'm completely Jewish.
Are you studying Jewish?
Yeah.
There and
I try to study. Yeah, I say I try because my friend Benny Lévy, who was one of my young masters, died before having completely read the Talmud, and he devoted half of his life, if not more, to that. So who am I to pretend? But I try to study. And if you read The Spirit of the Genius of Judaism, you will understand that I'm not completely at the zero level on this ground.
I want to thank Bernard-Henri Lévy for being with us this afternoon. And Tom Teicholz. Thank you, Tom, as well. So, two things. Bernard's book is for sale in the back, and he will be autographing them if you would like to purchase one. And if you would like a free ticket to the screening tomorrow night, we have tickets, and you can see me or Emily Hamilton, who's in the back, to get a ticket. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.